Hey everyone, it's Paul Bertorelli reporting for AVweb, and the photographs that I hope you enjoyed for the last minute or so were taken by this professorial man in the other Zoom window. That's Steve Zimmermann. He's a professional freelance photographer and aerial photographer who lives in the Denver area. If you go on his website, you will see his list of stuff or specialties is aerial, architectural, aviation, travel, performance, and fine art. Well, Steve, that's just about everything. I don't see sports on there, but
I'll tell you,
you don't limit yourself. That's for sure.
people ask me what I shoot, and I always tell them anything but weddings.
And how long have you been doing this?
I've had a camera in my hands all my life, just like I've been a pilot all my life. My parents were both pilots, and I grew up with airplanes. I've been doing it more or less full-time since I retired a few years ago. The air-to-ground stuff has been a constant theme, even when I was still employed. And the air-to-air came along when I needed some retirement projects to keep me busy.
And what did you retire from?
I'm an engineer. I developed medical equipment, medical devices.
I see. Okay. So what we did was here, we sorted these photographs into Steve's favorites and my favorites, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. And we had a couple of shared favorites, and the first one is this one of wind turbine blades. And this is just an absolutely fascinating photograph to me because it kind of shows the things you see from the air in terms of human effort. They went through a lot of effort to get these things organized. Where was this, Steve? How'd you get the shot?
This is the Vestas Turbine Blade Factory in Windsor, Colorado. It's a subject that I shoot frequently because I pass that way a lot, and I always have a camera in the cockpit with me. This particular time was this is my favorite shot of the turbine blades I've ever taken, even though I've got a lot of others that I consider to be worthy. This one worked out the best, probably because the light was just a little softer than usual. This is Colorado, and we generally have full sun here, but this particular day we had a very high, thin, cirrus overcast, and so the light was diffuse. And then having that truck in the bottom corner for scale just really set the whole thing up.
And what time of day was this?
This would have been mid-morning.
Segue here to the next favorite, and I wouldn't say for me personally this is less of a favorite, but it is a favorite, is the birds on water. Where was that taken, and how did you get it?
I was flying in oh gosh, what is it? An air cam. Phil Lockwood's air cam. Actually, it's not his particular personal airplane, but it's an air cam, and I was down there evaluating the air cam as a potential photo platform for my own use. I didn't eventually buy one, but I did get a lot of interesting photos in Central Florida while I was down there. This is a flock of diving ducks on the surface of a lake in Central Florida just after sunset, so it's blue hour. And by leaving out the far shore, it turns it into a very abstract composition where it's almost not clear until you look closely whether the birds are in flight or not. And I consider this to be my dollar bill shot because this was really early on in my serious air-to-ground work with my first full-frame digital camera.
And what was that camera? That
was a Canon 5D.
Another one that was a mutual favor of ours is this twisty road. I'm a motorcyclist, so naturally I'm interested in that road because I want to know where it is because I want to be on it. And it looks like it's in the high country, maybe up right near the timberline by the looks of it.
That's exactly right. It's Cottonwood Pass Road west of Buena Vista, Colorado. Up till a couple of years ago, that was a dirt road, and they recently paved it. And they've made it into almost a super highway in the mountains as far as mountain roads are concerned. And it's a spectacular drive. Even in the old days on the dirt road, it was worth driving up there. And I certainly would love to go back on the ground with something interesting.
And being a sharp-eyed motorcyclist, I know that in that one loop there, the SUV is crossing the double yellow, something I'm always looking for. You do all of these shots air to ground from inside the airplane, correct?
That's correct.
And how do
I,
you do that?
I have a couple of different airplanes. One is a Pipistrel two-seater, high wing, 100 horsepower. It's my low and slow airplane. And I have the ability to either remove the doors if it's nice out and I'm not going far, or leave the doors on and open sliding windows in both sides of the cockpit to shoot out of. And the Pipistrel is a really good platform for that. I can set it up at 65 knots with a notch of flaps and turn on the autopilot or fly with my feet. And it gives me time to set up a shot. Whereas my other airplane, the Bonanza A36, it's more of a personal transportation cross-country machine. And I've also set it up with openable windows on both sides of the cockpit. It's a little bit more restricted because the wing's in the way a lot of the time, so you can only shoot forward and down, not just straight down like I like to do in the Pipistrel. Mm-hmm. And of course, you're going a lot faster too.
Transitioning to some of the other photographs here is the one of the, I called it the Snakey River, but it's a river that runs in a small tight canyon. Where is that?
That's a side canyon on Lake Powell. That's in Colorado, actually. No, that's probably still Utah. Now that I think about it, yeah, it's probably still Utah. There's a lot of interesting things to shoot in Canyonlands and Lake Powell area, all of Utah for that matter.
The one that I call the monument, where is that? It's just a geological formation that looks like it is on a ridge line somewhere.
That's a famous volcanic dike called Chip Rock in northwestern New Mexico. The Navajo call it rock with wings because of the volcanic dikes that radiate from the neck. And
you decided to do that in black and white. It gives it an Ansel Adams feel. Why did you treat it that way?
Sometimes an image that I'm looking at in color just cries out to me for a black and white treatment. Of course, everything I shoot is in some sense color because it's a digital camera. But there's enough information in the raw files that I shoot that I can do a complete black and white conversion. Use a tool called Silver Effects Pro 2 that gives me really minute control over all aspects of the image.
Is that a plug-in to Photoshop or just its own application?
Both. You can either run it as a separate application or in Photoshop or Lightroom.
And while we're talking about black and white, we'll transition to this fabulous shot of the B-29 Doc, recently restored. It's been flying around the various air shows. You did that one in black and white too.
Yes, the color shot looks great, but for some reason that one also cried out to me for black and white. That day was the third flight Doc made post restoration, and I was lucky enough to be there. And we made two photo flights that day, one in the middle of the day and one just before sunset. And I got a lot of really interesting, beautiful shots of Doc that day.
And what time of day was this shot?
This is the midday photo shoot, so early afternoon. But it was November, so the light's still low angle.
And what were you shooting from?
I was shooting from an A36. In this case, not mine. This one was a turbo normalized A36, actually.
And speaking of a difficult light, here's a shot of the B-25, a Grumpy, that clearly you shot on a day that was either partially or overcast. Tell me how you got that and how much post-processing it took.
That's one of those shots where it does take a fair amount of post-processing because the light was so flat. In this case, I took it into Photoshop and cut the airframe out so that I could process it independently of the background. And that's something that I'll do if I have to, but I'd prefer to get it right in camera, as it were.
Moving on to another one of your favorites and my favorites was this shot. That's the famous Boeing P-26 pea shooter, and below that is Northrop's N9M. These are two of the rarest aircraft in the world. There are only two P-26s left that aren't replicas. And I believe the N9M no longer exists. I think that was destroyed in a crash, unless this is a replica.
No, this is that N9M, the one that crashed a year later. And that's the pilot that died in that crash. So this is a very important shot to me because it's literally the only shot ever made air to air of those two airplanes together at the same time. We had briefed two separate formations to get those airplanes individually, and it just so happened that the N9M passed through my frame to change sides of the airplane to get out of our way, and he passed through the frame, and I got one shot, and that's it. That's the only one that exists.
Wow, that's astonishing, because this looks like a carefully set up shot.
I shoot what's in front of me. I shoot what's on offer, and this was one of those lucky serendipitous moments that I happened to be ready for.
Amazing. Just for people who don't know, the P-26 was built by Boeing. It was the first metal monoplane fighter, early 30s, between the wars design. Cool looking airplane. And the N9M was one of Jack Northrop's pet projects that really was the forerunner of the B-2, because he was very interested in flying wings. And
it's remarkable that there's only 10 years that separate those two designs.
Yeah, well, and it's also amazing that you've got the photograph of both of them. So these images are pretty impressive. How did these shoots come about, particularly the air-to-air ones?
Many of the air-to-airs that I've been able to shoot have come about because the opportunities were arranged for by Scott Slocum. Scott's a professional aviation photographer, and he has an A36 and now a Baron that he uses for shoots. And sometimes he makes those airplanes available and organizes the warbirds to put in front of the airplanes so that photographers like me can go out and achieve a lifetime dream of flying in the same airspace with a B-24 or a Mosquito or something like that, and coming home with some great shots.
Well, the results certainly justify the effort. Normally when we do photography and aviation photography, we get that soft morning light or the late afternoon raking light. But maybe when you're shooting down on terrain or subjects on the ground, do you want that kind of light, or do you want something else?
I'm almost always shooting within 2 or 3 hours of sunrise or sunset, even for this kind of shot, the straight down stuff, because if there's any kind of topography, the shadows will throw it into relief and it'll make a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
You get a few hundred feet of altitude and everything starts to look flat.
We'll segue out of this with some additional shots, but one thing I wanted to ask you is, could you do what you do now on film?
Certainly would be much more challenging for several reasons. One is that I have the advantage of seeing while I'm still in the air what I'm getting. And if I didn't get what I thought I should have, I can go back and shoot it again. The other thing is that when you're in a vibrating airplane in turbulence, you're going to shoot a number of frames in order to get one that's sharp, even if you're shooting at high shutter speeds. So digital allows you to do that without spending money, or at least any more money.
So can we then conclude that you think that digital has improved the art and technology of photography?
I think it's changed the way people photograph things. The marginal cost of another frame is zero. So people take a lot more frames than they used to. And you can see it in social media that everybody's got a camera in their pocket, and a pretty decent one now with iPhones or Android phones. So there's just a lot more photography being done.
All right. Well, Steve, thanks for this little tour of your work. It's pretty fabulous. So we're going to show some more of them. And of course, it makes me green with envy, but maybe if I keep working on it, I'll get there.
Paul, thank you very much. It's my pleasure. And I really appreciate what you do on the journalism side.
Thanks. This is Paul Bertorelli. We've been talking with Steve Zimmermann, a professional freelance photographer in Denver, Colorado. Thanks for watching.